All right, so good evening, everybody, and thank you very much for joining us for the Funding and Later Life Planning webinar, hosted by ourselves at the Good Care Group in association with 5 Ways Financial Planning and Solar Society of Later Life Advisors. My name is Nathan Cherikoff. I am Client Services Manager at the Good Care Group. And I will just lay out the agenda for you now. So we will start off with an introduction and overview of the Good Care Group and care options available to you. That will be presented by Gemma Locke, who is our Head of Business Development. We will then move on to a care options question and answer session. So if you have any questions, you will be able to answer them. We do have some questions that have already been submitted, which we will start with. But when you are prompted, what you can do is you can submit questions, and I will explain how that will be done in the next slide, which will be housekeeping. And following our Q&A session, we will then have a presentation on the practical solutions and advice on how to fund long-term care and conduct a later life planning. That will be presented by Ian Evans, who is Head of Later Life Advice at 5 Ways Financial Planning, and he is also an advisory board member of the Society of Later Life Advisors. Following Ian's presentation, you will then have another question and answer session. Again, we will start with questions that have already been submitted, but if you think of any during the presentation, then you are able to submit them or ask them as you wish. So if we just move on to a little bit of housekeeping. So can I just ask that, can we make sure that you are muted, because any background noise can be quite distracting. So you can see at the bottom of your screen, you will have a microphone icon, which you can click, and when it turns red, you are muted. Also, this is being recorded, so if you don't want people to see your face, you can also click the camera icon. Once that turns red, we will not be able to see you. Now, when we are doing the question and answer section, if you decide you want to submit any questions, you can, at the top right of your screen, you will see the time. And to the left of that, there is a button that you can click that is displayed on the presentation. It's the one on the right-hand side that looks like a speech mark. You can click that to open the chat forum. And in there, you can put any questions that you would want either myself or Gemma, or when Ian is presenting, Ian to answer. And then when prompted, if you are brave enough to ask your questions to everybody, then you're welcome to do so as well. So now we are ready to start with the presentation. So I will hand over to Gemma Locke to talk about the Good Care Group and your care options available.
Thank you, Nathan, and thank you so much, everybody, for joining us this evening for the Funding and Later Life Planning webinar. I appreciate your time. This is late in the evening after a long day, so I would just take a few moments of your time just to give an overview about the Good Care Group and a little bit of background about myself. So I've got the privilege of being the Head of Business Development at the Good Care Group. I've worked for the Good Care Group for approximately 4 years, but I have been in the healthcare industry for approximately 15 years. And it's been a real privilege to be able to engage with both members of the public and also professionals and represent the company. So within my role and the business development team's roles is we engage with a number of people to provide advice and guidance, not just only about living care, but also about care choices, so that people are informed of what the care options are. And we have the privilege to speak to a number of people across in the public setting, but we do also liaise with professionals within the hospital settings, as well as care homes, GPs, solicitors for the elderly, solar representatives, and we also have a number of wonderful partners that we support, and they support us by providing hourly care and also supporting clients by advice and guidance. So the Good Care Group, we're proud to say, has been rated in all 5 domains by CQC, and we're excellent for the quality of care provided by the Care Inspectorate in Scotland. We are a multi-winning provider of living care, and we cover England and Scotland. So we're proud to just list on the bottom of that slide the various awards we've won recently, as well as the nominations that we've got currently, which are taking place for this year. We are proud to say that we have a highly qualified professional team of living carers who deliver one-to-one care in the client's home, and we offer a fully managed service with care that's supervised by a dedicated care manager, and we also have really good governance and oversight, so we have regional care managers that offer that additional arm of support. And our professional living carers are directly employed and trained by ourselves. We are proud to say that we have just over 1,000 employees or carers that we employ. And by doing the in-house training, we have that really good quality and assurance that we are being consistent in our care delivery. So the main takeaway points for yourselves today is I really want you to understand the concept of planning is essential. We quite often get these crisis calls, and the more we've got information about, the more informed we can make these informed decisions earlier rather than later. And the other takeaway point is looking at the regulated versus unregulated and the care options available to us. So I'm sure that you will find the information that Ian's given you absolutely of value to steer you in the right direction when you're looking at funding and later life planning. So just to highlight the conditions that we cover, we're very proud to say that we cover a number of specialties. Specifically, we have quite a few of our clients have dementia. We also have Parkinson's care, and we support people for end of life, as well as simply care and support in the home. But the main far-reaching benefits is it improves overall health and well-being. You can't beat the comfort of your own home, being surrounded by your loved possessions and your family pets. So we pride ourselves on providing really good quality living care support, especially with those clients who present with complex conditions. So the Good Care Group services we offer, for mentioning the palliative care, we also offer care and support, which I've just highlighted. We are offering, which we have done before COVID set in, but respite care. We've liaised heavily with a lot of the hospitals, both private and local hospitals, as well as care homes, to offer support to facilitate discharge directly out of a care home or a hospital setting. And respite can be offered either on a term of 2 weeks up to eight weeks. And we're finding increasingly the pressure of lockdown, family members just need to have that break. They need to have the reassurance and confidence to know that a living carer can come into a client's home and offer them really good quality in-house support. And what's really important for us is where we can support couples as well. More often than not, as we know, couples are separated. It comes to a time in the life where both of them might require care at different levels of care, and Mr. Smith, for example, might need to go into a care home setting, but they desperately don't want to separate Mrs. Smith, but there isn't simply the bed's availability, or the environment that Mr. Smith would go into is not necessarily conducive to Mrs. Smith. So we pride ourselves of keeping couples together and delivering care plans tailored to each individual, depending on their needs and their requirements. And we're also proud to say that we offer a nurse-led service. We have a consultant admiral nurse called Jane Pritchard that we employ, and she provides advice and guidance to families who have dementia, for example, and they just need to have some advice as far as how to support the clients and the family members and make simple adaptations around the home, for example. And we have Jackie Cooper, and Jackie Cooper is our occupational therapist, and she works very heavily with the families as well as hospitals, the discharge coordinators and the social workers and the care home settings to make sure that we can source the appropriate equipment to ensure that the environment that the client is being discharged into back into their home is safe and secure for them, and make sure that the appropriate home adaptations have taken place in a timely manner. So living care relatively is quite a new concept out in the public, and as far as the pathway of care, it's quite much in its infancy. And what we look to do is really kind of put living care at the forefront of people's minds as a real option and consideration as an alternative to a care home. So typically, living care from the Good Care Group's perspective would be delivered from one carer living in the client's home, and they would rotate on a team of carers, and it would be typically 2 carers appointed to one client, and they would do, for example, a rotation pattern of 2 weeks on and 2 weeks off, or 4 weeks on and 2 weeks off. So you get this really good continuity of care and consistency of rapport building and understanding the care plan, and really getting to understand the client's kind of likes, dislikes, what their kind of trigger points might be, and just how to really best serve the client to make sure that they live the very best life. The most important thing to consider, which when we get to retirement, a lot of people look to downsize, but they're adamant in their mind they don't necessarily want to go into a care home, they want to stay at home. They downsize so far that offering living care is simply not an option. So it's highly recommended when you are considering care options, if you are specifically looking at living care or overnight support, to have a spare bedroom. Now, from the Good Care Group's perspective, all of our notes are done electronically, so we have really good visibility, and the family members can also see the care plans real time. So essentially, internet access is key to do administrative tasks and to make sure the care plans notes are updated. Now, the carer will be on site, essentially on call for 22 hours a day. Like all of us, we need to have a break, so we allocate a 2-hour break for them in a 24-hour period, and we lean very much on our partners that we work with to provide the 2-hour break support as and when it's required through the care plan, so how the care plan's executed. But likewise, we sometimes have family members who are very happy to come and offer that support, and we also have clients during the 2-hour breaks that don't necessarily need to have support at that particular time. So our care plan, or the way it works, is essentially the care plan is delivered over a course of a day, and essentially it's delivered either on a 12-hour or a 10-hour basis, and it's very much delivered by tasks. So it's not a 9 o'clock to a 9 o'clock setting. It's very much dictated or arranged by the care plan, which is tailored to that specific individual's needs. And with the client, there would be the expectation to provide full board for the carer, because they're obviously naturally living on site, and 3 meals per day as well. So we would really wish, if the client's wishes also were aligned, is for the carer to eat those meals and socialise together with the client, so they have that rapport and the conversation style starts to begin. So there are various care options. Many of you might be familiar, but at home, I've just mentioned we've got living care. We also have hourly care, which is delivered not necessarily by ourselves. We speak and work with our partners to deliver hourly care, but there is an hourly care option, as well as respite support at home. Now, within a care home setting, traditionally there's the residential settings or the nursing care homes, and they too can offer that respite support as and when required. So most importantly, when people are looking at care choices, they come to this point at crisis. So it's important just to be aware that there is the regulated arm versus the unregulated routes. So us at the Good Care Group, we are regulated by the Care Quality Commissioning and also by the Scottish Care Inspectorate. So we go down a fully managed route. There is also the introductory agency route, which is classed as unregulated. Now, it's important to note that different scenarios play out where different needs and different levels of support are required. So I just want to highlight the difference between the two. So typically with the introductory agency, I would say carers are usually employed in usually on a self-employed basis. So they would be looking to do their own taxes, their national insurance and pension contributions. And the client or family member would have a direct contract with the carer, so they would be responsible for paying the carer directly. In addition, they would be responsible for any additional costs associated with travel to the placement and public liability insurance. And the due diligence to make sure that that carer has had all the various background checks done would be the responsibility of the person who's contracting the care, i.e. the client or the family member. So with a fully managed service, I speak on behalf of the Good Care Group, but this is largely the framework. A fully managed service, the carers are employed, managed and trained in-house and developed to make sure that there is that really good high quality consistency in the care delivery. And with ourselves, we have the dedicated 2 carers to the 1 client, so you don't have lots of different carers going in. We want to make sure we have that consistency. And we also have the support of a 24/7 support line, which is open 365 days a year. And you have that due diligence and oversight from a regional perspective by the regional care manager and the local care managers. So we can be very responsive and reactive to changes in circumstances or care needs. Now, most importantly, if a carer's needs changed or there was holidays or sickness cover, us as a fully managed service would take that on board. So we've never left a client without cover. If the person was to be employed directly through a contract with a client or family member, they would be responsible for sourcing sickness cover or sourcing holiday cover. So it's that gap between making sure that you've always got that responsive nature, so we can always be very reactive to changing circumstances. We very much pride ourselves that our professional carers, we have a rapid response team and a relief team that are on standby, that if the situation does change, we can be very reactive in responses to those situations. So I just want to cover over a few questions that if you are considering care options and care choices, and you're looking at various care providers, some really useful kind of questions just to think about. So really drill deep and make a list of what you want from a care provider. So what is the ideal situation? What are the needs? What are the desires? What are your aspirations from a care agency or a care home provider? So you want to see, what do you need help with? Is this a case of getting up in the morning? Is it a case of just walking the dog and doing a little bit of companionship and house duties, or assistance with personal care? So really list all those fundamental facts that you would like to have the support from a care provider. And most importantly, how often do you need them to visit? So if it's companionship, it might be a couple of times a week, but if it is that one on the hour in the morning or a couple of hours in the morning for support and a couple of hours in the afternoon. So where are those gaps that need to be looked after? So is it just on a temporary basis or a permanent basis? And what times would suit both the family members and the client? And specifically what activities, as I've mentioned before. And it's really important to just kind of highlight what your budget is, because that would look at where you are going, whether it's a regulated or unregulated route. Also make a list of the home care or care home providers that meet your needs. So we've discussed the CQC, the Care Quality Commissioner, and not all care providers I've mentioned are regulated. So really look at what their recruitment, how do they recruit their carers, where do they get their carers from, have they got a recruitment process that is robust, so do they do their due diligence, what is their interview process like, are their carers experienced, and have they done the background checks to make sure they are of of quality? And what does the training look like? So do they offer specialist training? What's the manual handling training, for example? Do they offer that ongoing training support? And are there any accredited trainings that the professional carers can go down and do further learning? And looking at the fully managed staffing contingency. So as the Good Care Group, we don't have any agency staff at all. We very much pride ourselves. We've never used agency staff. We employ all of those. We have that staffing continuity. So if you are considering a care home, for example, or a home care provider, just look at the ratios of employed versus agency staff that they use. And how are those staff members? Really get a feel about asking the right questions as far as how long do they stay with the company? What is the general feel? Look at the reviews and the quality procedures. Sometimes things don't always go according to plan, but what are the procedures in place to rectify and address issues promptly and accurately and in best interest of the client? So it's important to look at potentially, have they got a clear audit process in place? Do they do spot checks on their carers that are delivering care in the home? What's their due diligence that they do? And what support do they offer? So is there a multidisciplinary team? And this is depending on what the needs of the clients are, but if that's important to you, what does that look like? So from all those questions, really draw up that short list of home care and those care home providers, and only put the ones on there that actually tick the boxes rather than the ones you think might be okay but not quite right. So really look and drill deep, and then contact those providers on the list. Now, the most important thing is always ask the questions. Don't ever be afraid to ask the question, and it's those providers that will give you the time and the space to actually ask them and answer the questions for you. It's an opportunity for you to get to know them, as well as an opportunity to get to know whether it's a best fit for your loved one or yourselves. So this is just a really useful kind of point of reference of where to find care. So specifically living care, I would strongly have a point in the Living Care Hub. They've got a fantastic resource centre for you to give you some points and tips about living care, and also to signpost you in the right direction. And then when you're looking at local care providers, I would very much go to the UK Home Care Associations. The website's just listed there. Once you've found those local providers and you've got your shortlist, I would then visit the regulator, the Care Quality Commission website, and look at the latest CQC report. And that will give you a really good overview about the general ethos and the framework of that particular provider, and how they're stacking up against the guidance that the Care Quality Commission have set out to provide excellent care. So thank you very much. We have got a few questions, which I will, the questions that have been submitted, I will put forward probably to Nathan in certain scenarios. Please do feel free to submit any of the questions you may have out of that presentation in the chat forum to the right-hand side of the screen. But thank you very much. So Nathan, if I just bring up some questions, it won't be a moment.
Yeah, of course. So just a reminder during this, if you do think of any questions, to get to the chat forum. It's just at the top right of your screen, next to the time, that little speech bubble. If you want to click that and add any questions in there, or when prompted, if you're brave enough just to ask in front of everybody, then by all means just unmute yourself. We'll be happy to answer any questions you have.
Wonderful.
Gemma,
fantastic. Absolutely. So the first question we had come through was, how quickly can living care be set up?
So, I mean, speaking on behalf of the Good Care Group, on average, it takes around a week to implement care. It can often be done quicker. We have been known to implement care within 24 to 48 hours. However, everything is dependent on the outcome of a care assessment that would have to be undertaken, and the availability of suitably experienced carers. So, I mean, be wary of companies that will say they can implement care in a flash, because what you want to make sure is that the care is being set up right. You've got the right care and the right care plan. But on average, I would say we probably take about a week to implement care.
Fantastic. And which areas do we cover?
So the Good Care Group are a national company. We cover the whole of England and Scotland. I think the only exception is a couple of the Isles out in the middle of nowhere in Scotland, but otherwise we've got coverage everywhere.
Fantastic. And what's really important to note as well is our carers are geographically mobile across the country. So this is how we can really provide the carer and client match, because we best match the carers fundamentally with the skill set that's required, but also with the likes and similar interests to the client that we're going to help support.
Yeah, absolutely. So we don't limit our matching to carers who are local to a client, because we're going to really limit the pool of carers we have to choose from. The most important thing is that matching of skill set and experience. So yeah, the carer could be coming from anywhere, and as Gemma says, they're geographically mobile, so we'll bring them to you.
And another question we've had raised is, how long do your living carers stay with the Good Care Group?
So, I mean, with the Good Care Group, we look after our carers, so there's very little kind of carer churn, as it were. But obviously carers kind of situations change, so how long they're with us varies. However, the carers staying with clients, so long as we get that match right, the client is happy with the carer is happy with the client, then the intention is this will be a long-term arrangement. So as though there is no reason why that arrangement wouldn't be in place we have carers who've had the same clients for a number of years. Also, we can do respite of anywhere from 2 weeks, so you can just do short term as well.
And we've answered the question, do we have a hub of carers who cover the country or use carers locally? So that's largely been answered. I just wanted, and the following question, that's, do we use carers from abroad? And we'd like to say we're very proud as a company. We have over 40 nationalities in the business. That's not just carers, that's people within the business generally. And approximately 50% of our carers are UK citizens. But importantly, the carers are all employed by us, so they have that really good continuity of care across all of our clients when we're offering support in their homes. And then the final question we have on a living care basis is, so the question is around hourly care versus living care. What are the requirements? So we've highlighted the requirements are that they need to have a minimum of 2 bedrooms ideally, and looking at the mitigation of risk. So if I can just pass across to yourself, Nathan, about talking about COVID and the situation with living care and how that's worked for a lot of our clients.
Yeah, absolutely. So during the uncertain times we're in at the moment, live-in care is the safest option of care, because the carer essentially will be isolating with the client. And we are actually, as a company, we are very proud to say that throughout the pandemic, we have had 0 cases of clients contracting COVID as a result of our carers' transmission. I think there was only a single case of any clients contracting COVID, and that was as a result of an incoming carer. So in terms of pros and cons of hourly care versus live-in care, you have the continuity of the one dedicated carer, so you can build up a relationship and understanding. You've got a carer who's going to be there throughout the day to maintain safety, and you have that minimum carer turnover, which reduces the risk of infection in this kind of uncertain time. I think there are kind of obvious benefits to having visiting care. It's at specific times if the client doesn't require somebody supporting them 24/7. But with live-in care, obviously, you've got that safety net of somebody being there at all times as well.
Fantastic. Thank you, Nathan. There was a question raised by Jenny, which Ian's kindly responded, which he's going to pick up later on in the presentation. So thank you, Ian. What training do our carers receive? If I can ask you to answer that one, Nathan, I'd greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. So our carers are, as part of the kind of recruitment process, there's a very kind of vigilant, stringent vetting process. So we'll only take on people with previous care experience, very good references, a clean DBS record. Then regardless of how well they have done through the interview stages and those checks, every carer has to go through a week-long intensive training course in our head office, which is delivered by our own staff. And they have to pass every module of that course. That covers all aspects of care. So that could be moving and handling, use of equipment, medication administration and monitoring. We specialize in providing care for people living with dementia. So there is a proportion dedicated to dementia training. There's training on delivering a healthy, balanced diet, and all aspects of care. And that's the initial training. They also are encouraged to do additional training and learning and development of their own outside of the company. There is ongoing refresher training that they will have to do as well, and online learning that we can offer as well. So the initial training is 1 week, but they have ongoing and refresher training as well.
Thank you. And there's a couple of questions, very similar questions actually, about how do you keep the carers, there's twofold. How do you keep the carers engaged with you when they don't have clients for them straight away?
I mean, the carers are rarely without work. We have a high demand for our services. And actually it's rare that the carer will be going very long without having a placement. The troubles are only ever kind of the other direction, if there's ever kind of too much demand, but it's rare. We've got good care availability, and that means that we're able to service the needs, but likewise the carers aren't waiting for long.
No, and essentially we do have a dedicated recruitment team, so we're constantly recruiting. So it's that balance between deployment of carers to make sure that we deploy them in the right placements, but we are constantly recruiting new carers because we're meeting the supply and demand of living care, especially in the situation we're in at the moment.
Yeah.
There's the question around, do you ask carers about their religious beliefs so they can form a common bond?
Yeah, absolutely. So when our carers kind of join us, we learn all about them as individuals, and obviously their religious beliefs, their interests, their hobbies, their skill sets, and everything is all kind of taken. So when we are matching carers to clients, it's done primarily based on skill set and experience, but we will also take into consideration things like personality and interest and who's going to be a good fit. When we are matching, when we have done the assessment and we know we are then looking at matching a carer, we will provide a profile of the carer, that prospective carer that we believe would be most suitable. Included in that profile is this information, so who they are as a person, their religious beliefs, and then also their experience and their skill set as well. So yes, we do certainly ask the questions.
Thank you. I'm just conscious of time, so we've got another couple of questions here. From one from Jenny. How do carers fill their time when they're not actually required for support? For example, whilst clients are dozing or watching mindless television.
So generally, I mean, so the carers, when they're not directly supporting the client, will probably keep themselves busy around the property, doing bits and bobs, keeping the place neat and tidy, maybe running a hoover around, or if they're dozing, probably not. Or if they're on a break, then the carers will bring things to keep themselves entertained. They'll have a laptop with them, they'll read a book, and potentially watch a TV in their own bedroom as well if they're not needed. But hopefully they'll be kind of interacting with the client directly as well and providing that companionship.
Wonderful. Thank you, Nathan. So the last one is from Rachel. How do most clients find you?
I think that's probably...
I would answer that if you want, Nathan.
Yeah,
absolutely. So essentially, as a business development team, we go out and we speak, as I mentioned earlier, to the members of the public and lots of professionals. We've been very much established as a living care provider. We've been going for over 10 years, nearly 11 years. So we've got a very strong reputation within the industry. We naturally advertise on various platforms and our website is very strong, but largely our word of mouth or recommendations from people who've historically bought into the service or experienced our living care service. And we're very proud of the fact is our living care referrals come from the family members who've had historic experience with ourselves. Fantastic, thank you. Thanks, Rachel, for your comment. That's lovely. Wonderful. So I think that seems to be the conclusion of all the questions. If anybody does have any further questions after this evening, or if you want to ask us anything offline, my contact details will be sent out shortly after the presentation. So you'll have all the information you need. So feel free to contact me either directly on my mobile or send me an email. I'll be very happy to answer any further questions.
And likewise, our client services team are available 8 a.m. till 8 p.m. Monday to Sunday. So if you have any queries specifically around our services, then don't hesitate to give us a call. We'll be more than happy to help.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Nathan. Very kind of you. So without further ado, I shall pass you across to Ian Evans. Thank you, Ian, for your time this evening. And if you'd like to do your presentation about funding of later life planning, I'd be very much appreciative. Thank you so much.
Good evening, everybody, and I'll try and keep it as good as the last bit's been as well. I'm just going to turn my presentation on, so please bear with me. That's not the bit I want. We've got that wrong. Should we try again? Sorry, technical problems. I'll be there in a second. So it doesn't seem to be wanting to share, so I'm not sure what I've done wrong.
So if
Present
you
now.
on the bottom bar.
I've got present now, a window or your entire screen.
Your entire screen.
Your entire screen.
I've got to get that bit up first. That's the bit I want. All right. Can you see my presentation now?
We certainly can.
Right. Let's try again. Sorry about that. Technology, technophobe me. Right. I'm Ian Evans. I'm a member of the Solar Advisory Board. I'm also the regional coordinator for the Southwest, and I'm head of later life advice at a company called 5 Ways Financial Planning, based in Weston-super-Mare. I've been a financial advisor for over 30 years, and I do specialise in advising the elderly and vulnerable clients. And I work very closely with a lot of solicitors and obviously companies like the Good Care Group to make sure the right advice is given to the people at the right time. I've done a few of these presentations. I do sometimes talk quite quickly, so if I do, somebody say something and I'll try and slow down. But just moving on, that's a little bit about me. The Society of Later Life Advisors, we're one of those organisations that not many people know about. We were started off by Tish Hannafin, who is a barrister, and she also started something called the Solicitors for the Elderly, or SFE. It's the only accreditation acknowledged by the UK government, and in the Care Act of 2014, there's currently about 420 to 450 of us actively out there giving advice, and the accreditation is only awarded to people or advisors who understand the big picture, and our charging structure has to be within set parameters. The stringent application assessment process I'll mention a bit later on, but basically it's once you apply, you have to have the standard qualifications to be a financial advisor, plus 2 additional qualifications, which is care advice and equity release. Then you send your application form in, you get some case studies that you have to do, and then you get called up for a one-to-one interview where they will just go through everything in that case study, and you're expected to know what it's all about. So tax pressures that can affect the elderly and vulnerable, what benefits are available, and all the things I'm going to talk about very shortly. Once you've passed that application, and it's only about 40% that pass it first time, you then have to be reaccredited every year, and then every 5 years you have to go through the full accreditation process again. So it's very, very subjective who gets in and who doesn't get in, and it's mostly for advisors that do understand the big picture and not someone that think they're just going to make money out of advising the elderly and vulnerable. Most solid advisors I know don't get too much money out of this advice. They do it because they care about the clients they're dealing with. So the reason there is the Society of Later Life Advisors and also the Solicitors for the Elderly, here's a few statistics. 850,000 people with Alzheimer's and dementia, and they believe that's going to be over 1 million by 2025. The scary subject here is this is obviously pre-COVID, because we've all got COVID blinkers at the moment, but 225,000 people will be diagnosed this year, or 1 every 3 minutes, which is quite a significant statistic. 1 in 6 has dementia or Alzheimer's. 70% of people in care homes suffer from dementia. Over 40,000 people under 65. So you can see from the slides, the bottom number, because I'm a financial advisor, that's a number that I always get interested in, is they believe unpaid carers save the economy over £11 billion a year. That is a significant amount of money, with people looking after their partners, husband, wife, uncles, aunt, or loved one, and not claiming the right amount of benefits. So the next figure, moving on to benefits, £3.7 billion of unclaimed benefits in the UK. I always ask the question, the people that are not claiming are mostly elderly or retired. And I always ask the question, is this because of awareness or pride? I get asked a lot, people with a tenants allowance. So I go to see people in their homes, and I always say to them, "Do you claim a tenants allowance?" "Oh, no, we don't need that." And I talk it through with them, and it is specifically for those people that have had to sell their car, or they struggle getting a delivery spot from Tesco's, they have to get a taxi. A tenants allowance is an income to them to help them with those costs and charges. And as we know, there's 2 rates, which I'll come on to in a minute, but this is a benefit that's available for people to claim, and you fill in the claim form, and it's a worthwhile claim. One thing that I will say, though, is anybody, and if there's any solicitors listening, anybody trying to claim a tenants allowance, don't download the forms and send them off. phone up DWP and ask them to post it to you, because if you download them and submit them, they're not backdated. Whereas if you get them posted to you, they've got a date stamp on them, and it can take up to 3 months to get the benefit approved. It will be backdated from the day the form is sent to you from DWP. Whereas if you download it and complete it off the internet, they don't backdate it. So I always try and point that one out. And that's for everybody as well. So it's a very significant point to understand as well with that one. So carry on with the tenants allowance. It's a flat rate of either £59.70 or £89.15 a week. Basically, it's day rate or night rate. It doesn't matter on the health conditions. It's effectively, if you can get by during the day on your own and no issues at night, you'll get the £59.70. If you need help at night, and that's usually assistance going to the toilet or getting up, or you're unsteady on your feet, so you do need extra bit of care at night, you get the full £89.15 rate. The problem in this country is most people are stoic, so when they actually fill the application form in, they do it on their best day, when really a tenant's allowance should be claimed on their worst days, so that, you know, those days when you can't work more than 50 feet or 50 yards, whatever it is, you put down the bad days, and you should get the higher rate. The other thing is with care homes, if you're in a care home, in my opinion, you automatically need 24-hour care if you're in a residential home. Most residential homes do not apply for the higher rate. It's something that you have to nudge. Some do, but there's quite a lot that don't. I've seen it in 2 or 3 cases where family members come to me to ask me for some help and advice, and I've looked at the attendance allowance, they're only getting the lower rate, and I've said, how long have they been in the residential home for? Oh, 2 years. Well, they've missed out on 2 years worth of higher rate benefit because they don't backdate it either. Another benefit that some of you may have heard about is funded nursing care contribution. It's also known as registered nursing care contribution. If you Google FNCC or RNCC, it's the same benefit. I think there were slight differences between England and Scotland years ago, but it's one and the same. It's a benefit that is £183.92 per week, and it is only there for people that need extra medical help. It's not to pay for the residential side of it, it is to pay for the nursing care. So if someone's had a health assessment, which should happen when you go into residential care with nursing, but they don't get the NHS continuing health care, which I'll come on to in a moment, they may be offered funded nursing care contribution. I've seen it in quite a few instances where the care home is actually receiving it, but they haven't told the family members they're getting it because it goes towards the cost of the nursing care. Carers allowance, flat rate. Problem with carers allowance is if you've got state pension, you won't get it because it's means tested. It's a benefit I don't see very often, but it is available. Then there's a 12-week property disregard, which means the residential care is paid for the first 12 weeks of permanent care if the member owns a property and they have other assets and they're below 23,250. Now, if I can just pause for a second, I had a question sent to me prior to the meeting saying local authorities across the country are either stopping the 12-week disregard or requiring families who are using it to pay back the funds of the initial 12-week period. I'm not heard of that, so whoever sent that question, I'd be really grateful if you could message me, because I'd need to do some investigations on that, because I looked at that this afternoon and it's still in the statutory guidance. So I have known instances where local authorities apply the rules incorrectly. So please, whoever sent that question in, could they contact me so I could have a look at that for them? Okay. There's also something called the Universal Deferred Payment Arrangement, which is a charge put against the home until the property is sold. Now, effectively, just to give you an example of this, so if there's a couple living in the home and one person goes into care, the property is disregarded because somebody's living there. But if the person was on their own and then they went into care, but they had assets below 23,250, but they had a property worth, say, £300,000, what would happen is the local authority would pay for the first 12 weeks anyway. Then if you hadn't sold the property, they'd put a charge against the property with interest rolling up. So effectively, you've got 12 weeks to sell your property before the local authority will put a charge on it. They charge interest on the property now. Sorry, they charge interest on the loan now, and they also charge a fee to set it up. So I've had instances where people have come to me with this situation, and I've contacted the local authority and said, look, we've got enough funds to cover the next few months of payments. Don't put a charge on the property. We'll get the property sold. We'll get the money invested or in a product that will pay the care home fees, and move it from there. And it saves an awful lot of time, pressure, and grief all round. So it's like Gemma said in her presentation, planning in this situation is key. NHS continuing healthcare, which is fully funded healthcare, and it is fully funded healthcare. You may have heard horror stories where they've said they've been awarded it, but the NHS or the local NHS trust won't pay the full amount of care. They have to. It's legal. It's law. They fully fund the NHS. Okay. So what happens is a healthcare assessment is done. If they don't, if they're extremely poorly, and there's a set parameter, I've got the NHS decision tree and the booklet. It's about a 36-page leaflet, and then there's the diagram where you get it. You have priorities and then high needs. You have to be pretty poorly to get it, but the guidance stipulates it's not palliative care. And one of the most misunderstood things about NHS continuing healthcare is people think you have to be down to receive it. You don't, because you could be diagnosed with a terminal illness, but you could live for 12 months and be healthy for 9 of those 12 months. So they don't pay it. However, there is something called fast track, and that's if you are very poorly and you are dying very quickly, the GP will put the fast track through, and you'll normally get NHS continuing healthcare for the last few weeks of your life. And that's where it gets confusing, because although it's not palliative, people that get it tend to be in palliative care. The thing with NHS continuing healthcare, you will receive that whether you're in a residential home or you're being cared for domiciliary. So, for instance, people using the Good Care Group and they're very, very poorly, they may be able to apply for NHS CHC. So, I've had this several times. I know this is a bit of a whistle-stop talk because it's a very large subject. Deliberate deprivation of assets. And as you can read from the slide, that's where a person's intentionally deprived themselves of an asset so they don't have to pay for care. The big difference between this and inheritance tax gifting, most people know that if you gift assets away for inheritance tax, as long as you live for 7 years, it falls out of your estate. As far as deprivation of assets is concerned, there's no time limit. However, I have heard of several local authorities that are using the 7-year rule. Whether that's right or wrong, they don't know. But the actual rule is there is no time limit to go back. So, for instance, I have an example of a gentleman that sadly was diagnosed with early onset dementia. But one day a week he was going to a day centre. And about 3 years into this, they gave the property to their children. And about 6-7 years after that, they went to, the gentleman had to go into care because he was quite poorly. And they went into care. The local authority looked at it when the application was made for the local authority to pay for the care and said, no, you deliberately gave your house away 7 years ago, because the day centre he was going to happened to be run by the local authority, and they believed there was a really, really good chance he'd have to go into care at some point. So it's very difficult to give assets away, and I quite often get it when people come to see me and they say, oh, husband, wife, mum, dad, granddad, or whoever have gone into care, can we put the house in our name? The short answer is no. The only way it possibly can be done, if there's a very, very large inheritance tax situation, you may be able to make some gifts to try and offset that. But that's very complicated, and I'm not going to go down that route this evening. So just going back to who Solar are, the accreditation was established in 2003, and then the examination standards came in 2006, and 2008 really was when we first started to make a name for ourselves to help families identify with the local specialist advisors. We have advisors up and down the country, including Scotland and Wales, and I know there are different rules in Wales and in Scotland. So if anybody is in either of those areas, let me know, because I can put you in contact with a regional coordinator for that area, and they will be able to answer you specific questions with regard to that country. In 2015, there was the FCA Vulnerable Client Initiative, and that's with the Financial Conduct Authority. basically with identifying vulnerable clients and clients at risk, and how they do need advisors that understand the situation and are able to look after them and provide them with the right advice. So the objectives of Solar, as it says there, we're not for profit. It's a consumer-facing organisation to help people find the right advice. Lord Lipsey has been banging the drum for Solar at the Houses of Parliament for ages. He's very, very supportive of Solar and all the things we do. And the idea is to maintain developed standards in later life. So basically, if you have an elderly relative, client, or anyone that needs help, if you get a Solar advisor in, you are getting the gold standard of advice for the elderly and vulnerable people. So we know that the future of social care funding, we know that the reviews have been done, we know it's been kicked into the long grass, but at some point, everybody in this country may need some form of specialist advice with regard to paying for care. The Care Act of 2014 places a duty on local authorities to facilitate access to financial information, especially for self-funders. And the advisors should have appropriate qualifications and accreditation. The only appropriate qualifications and accreditation are Solar at the moment. The FCA tried to do one of their own accreditations, but it didn't work. So the only one that is listed at the moment is the Solar accreditation. So if you need advice in this area, look for the Flower or look for the Solar advisor. The website gets about 6,000 hits a month, so we're quite busy. Many self-funders deplete their assets when accredited financial advice earlier could have prevented this. There are various things that can be done. There are various plans that can come out there. Sometimes people ask me and I say it's too early. We can't do a lot of planning at the moment, but we can look at it and give you some guidance. Running out of money does cause difficulties. I've known care homes that are privately owned where someone's run out of money and the care home won't accept local authority funding, and the absolute upheaval for moving an elderly person from one care home to another is awful. It really is. So that's why specialist advice is required. And it says it's well-being. Part of the Care Act is linked to peace of mind, and we do try to offer that to all of our clients. When a client comes to see me to talk about what they can do, how they pay for care, we look at budgeting, we look at cash flow modelling, if there's any inheritance tax issues with estate planning, the options for funding. Now, because I can't hear everybody, you're on mute, I'm going to ask a question about immediate care annuities. Many people, including care home managers, have never heard of an immediate care annuity or immediate needs annuity, and that is where a lump sum is paid to secure an income for the rest of that person's life. The income is paid direct to the care home. There's no tax implications, and depending on age and health, in some respects, it's a very, very useful thing to have and to use. If people have a large amount of savings or investments, we may look at doing an investment portfolio instead, taking an income from the portfolio, or we may look at doing both. But we don't go down that route till we've explored all the other benefits that are available to them and what they can claim, including NHS CHC. Recently, I was asked to do a presentation regarding a particular case we got involved in, where a gentleman was refused NHS CHC because he was diagnosed with Parkinson's. He was even, and the respite care was costing his wife a fortune. They didn't have too much money. But when we looked into it, it was a misdiagnosis. He actually had parasupranuclear palsy, which presents like Parkinson's in the early years, but in the later years, it degenerates very, very quickly. So we got assessments done, and he was admitted into a residential home with nursing. The cost was £1,600 a week, but he was awarded NHS healthcare, which is fully funded. I then got a phone call from his wife to say the NHS said they weren't going to pay the full £1,600. And I said, no, that's not your battle. That's to do with the care home and the NHS because it's fully funded. And in the end, guess what? The NHS paid the £1,600 per week. Sadly, the gentleman, he lasted about 18 months. But for his last 18 months, he was having the care he needed and deserved, which was lovely. We do look at equity release. Some of my colleagues that work over in the southeast, we've got properties that are high in value. We've used the situation where they've taken equity release out of the property to fund either residential care or domiciliary care. And I know care at home, I saw one of the guests was from Home Instead, and I've worked closely with a chap in the Western offices, and we've seen this where people will take an equity release on their property to help pay for their care at home. and that's fantastic. It works extremely well. So, as I've already mentioned, we have to have the standard advisor qualifications. Then we have to hold what we call a statement of professional standing every year. And then we do have an understanding of the Care Act. It's quite a dry and emotive subject, but I assure you, all the solid advisors I know give this advice because they've normally had personal experience of a relative in care, and they want it done properly, but they've seen it not happen correctly. And also with the mental health capacity in the court of protection cases. So we have a slight understanding of that. But what solid advisors do have is a network, normally of other professionals they can go to ask them for specialist help and advice and steer somebody in the right direction. These are the standards. This is the financial skills and legal partnership. As I've already mentioned, we're relicensed annually and then we're reaccredited every 5 years. These are the companies that work with Solar. If anybody ever goes to Citizens Advice Bureau and they want to talk about care, I'm one of the people that gets the phone call from CAB saying, can you help this person? So we do tend to provide quite a lot of help and information to people without charging for it. But obviously, we're not a charity. The advisors do run a business, so there are fees and charges, but they're detailed on an individual basis after a full assessment's carried out, and if we can help you. That's the website, Society of Later Life Advisors. You can find an advisor, as you see there, find an advisor. If you put in your postcode and any mile radius, you'll come up with the advisors in the area. We're quite well supported in this area, obviously. The further south to Cornwall, there's not too many of us, there's about 5 or 6. There's not too many in East Anglia, but Bristol, Bath, London, the Midlands, and there's quite a few up in Scotland as well, and there is a section in Wales. So wherever you live in the UK, if you need to speak to a Solar advisor, you can find one. So the last bit is any questions and also the regulatory information, but I'm going to close my screen down now and come back to the group. So I suspect there may be some questions that I need to be asked, as well as the ones that already come to me prior to the meeting.
Yes, I think maybe if we say thank you, firstly, Ian. That was very, very informative, very interesting. Some of that I will certainly be using when we're speaking to clients. Now, we have some questions that have already been submitted, which we'll start with.
I'll go through those first. As I said, I'd like whoever, I'll have a look, see if that question has come to me. No. Right. Yeah, as I said, whoever submitted the question about local authorities not doing the 12-week disregard, whoever that was, I really would like to find out, because I need to explore that. Because, as I said, I have had experience of local authorities not applying the rules correctly. What was required? Domicile, live in a residence can be liquid. Basically, with regards to the 12-week disregard and some of the things I've discussed, the university deferred payment arrangements only apply to people going into residential care. They don't apply to domiciliary care. So domiciliary care or care at home, you have to fund that yourself. The only other way around it is, as I've said, if you've got a property that's worth an amount of money, you may be able to take an equity release from that property to help cover your funding cares. Yeah, I think that answers question 2 as well. Sorry, Gemma, there's 2 in black that I did at the last presentation. Do you want me to go over those again?
Yes, if you could do, that'd be very kind. Thank you, Ian. I think it's quite an interesting one, so thank you.
Okay. One of the questions was, how do I get a power of attorney if my mother has no longer got capacity? Unfortunately, you can't get a power of attorney if the person's lost capacity. You have to apply for a deputyship. And the deputyship can either be a local authority deputyship, a member of the family being the deputy, or a legal deputy. The cost is quite expensive. So going back to planning, I always say a power of attorney is probably more important than a will, or as important as a will. And you've got 2 types of power of attorney. You've got health and welfare and property and financial affairs. The cost, they're around about 1,500 quid to do husband and wife, and both of them. Sounds expensive, however, appointing deputies can go into the multiples of thousands. if the person's lost capacity and the solicitor is dealing with it and they want the solicitor to be the deputy, you can have charges up to £15,000 and above if it's a complicated case. So it makes a bit of it's a bit of a difference, 1,500 to 15,000. If there's solicitors listening tonight, they might challenge me on that one, but I have seen a bill for one, so I'm saying from experience. Right, question. My dad has passed away, leaving everything to his. Oh, sorry. My dad has passed away, leaving everything in his will to my mum, who has dementia. They both have financial powers of attorney. Mum doesn't have capacity for financial decisions. Can we children keep anything of dad's, or do we have to sell it all to prep for mum's care? If your dad's will left everything to the children, or that's the children, that's your money. If he left everything to your mum, then that is your mum's money, and that will be assessed. So it's done on an individual basis. So they will assess your mum's financial situation, and they'll make a decision. But if your dad left money in his will to the children, that is your money, so it's outside of your mum's estate. But if it went to your mum, then I'm afraid that will be taken into consideration, as is the house. The only time the house may not be taken into consideration is if a member of the family moves in to look after her and there's an age, you have to be over 60, or you have a disabled child living there. It's something that's very specialist. If someone is in that situation, contact me or Gemma and ask me. Oh yeah, that's a great one. This is a two-parter because I think one's for me to answer and one's for Nathan to answer.
Yeah, I think Nathan's actually answered the second part of that already earlier in the question. So it's just your part, actually, and thank you.
Fund for care. Basically, I've gone through the benefits and the funding. Basically, take financial advice. Depends on how much capital you've got. You've got the capital allowances between 14,250 to 23,250. Then you've got income as well, which is tariff income, which is taken into consideration. So what usually happens is the local authority will come and do an assessment. They look at the income statements, they look at the last for bank statements, the last for savings and investments you've got. There are some investments which are disregarded as far as the local authority assessment is concerned, the common one of which is investment bonds. They've been challenged in the government several times. I've been doing this work now for over 10 years. They're still in there. They won't get taken away. However, if an investment is made into an investment bond and it is assessed and the local authority would deem that it was inappropriate investment, class as a deliberate deprivation. So we as advisors have to be very careful what we do with regards to investment bonds. I think I covered the question about NHS funding, which was, can you give some insight into NHS funding available for people who need full-time care? It has to be assessed, and if it's awarded, it doesn't matter which setting you're in, whether it's residential or domiciliary, it's available to you. Okay. I'll just answer the questions because I can see the questions. The carers allowance bit is really to do with what income you have. If a person is being looked after receiving occasional care, will they receive carers allowance? Carers allowance depends what other income they have because it's means tested. But the person will get attendance allowance. No, immediate care annuities can only be paid for residential care. They can't go for domiciliary care at the moment. I know they're being explored, but as it stands, they're only used for immediate care because the income goes directly to the care home. Therefore, it's tax-free. Whereas if the income from the annuity went to that person, it would create a tax liability because we're talking about quite hefty sums of money here. So you could be having £2,000-3,000 a month benefits, which if you've got to pay tax on makes a big difference. So that's why it goes to the care home. Whoever put the question is, you can do a power of attorney yourself online. It only costs £82 per person. It certainly did, but you've got to make sure you've done the right power of attorney, and you have to make sure you've put the discretionary fund management rules in there, and you have to have gone through other bits and pieces. So if you understand the law, great, do it online, fantastic. But I assure you, most solicitors love people that do them themselves, and people do their wills themselves. They make far more money sorting out the problems after they've done individually rather than going to a solicitor.
Just to pick up on that, Ian, sorry, my father has literally just done it himself online. So what are the considerations that have to be made if you are doing that online yourselves? Well,
you've got there's the box of when I've lost capacity or capacity at any time. And if there's any investment decisions to be made, a lot of investment houses use discretionary fund managers. And if you haven't got that section filled in, or it's written in, then they can't look after the money for you. It causes all sorts of problems and it creates extra charges. Okay. So you can do it online. I've got no issues with people doing it online. Just make sure it's done correctly. You know, one of my colleagues did it online because they refused to go to a solicitor. So it's horses for courses. And I should have said you can do it yourself for 82 quid. I do apologise for that. And that £82 is actually just the registration fee to the Office of the Public Guardian. Right. Here we go.
I think that essentially is all the questions. Thank you, Ian. That's wonderful.
Well, actually, there's a load of them. So we may.
Oh, are there? I've got to scroll down my screen. Oh, yes, there are. Carry on through.
Okay. Whoever said that I've not known an immediate care annuity paid directly to a residential to a domiciliary setting, but as I said, there's a tax implications about it. So fair enough. I'll double check that one if I'm incorrect.
So I think just in case there's anybody who's not actually able to, for whatever reason, see these questions, I'll just read them out just in case, Ian. So if a couple is living together and the council is assessing your income for home care, do they count just the person who needs care's income, or do they look at the couple's total income?
Basically, the care is on an individual basis. So if it will only be done on that individual assessment. So if there's a joint account and the income are going in, they'll tend to split it. The capital will be split 50-50 if it's in a joint savings account. If it's income, it's that individual person's income that will be assessed, not the other person, because it's that person's health requirements.
Okay. Why do certain conditions qualify for CHC and others not? For example, dementia doesn't seem to qualify even though the care needs are the same as the conditions that do.
It really just depends on the assessment panel. Most ones I know of, that most times people apply for NHS CHC, they don't get it, and it normally goes to an appeal panel, and it really would depend on that local authority, on that local health authority, and whether they'll award it or not, and how it goes to. It's quite often, if it goes to an appeal, it's a solicitor that will help you with it if you need to go to it. If it's an awful lot of money, I always say go to the solicitor because they'll fight it for you, and there's some specialist solicitors that will do it. There is a set criteria, but it is down to the individual health authority that will do the assessment whether they'll award it or not.
Okay. And the same person who just asked, how might one start a CHC application?
Basically, if someone's already in the residential home setting, they can ask the care home manager to get one done. If the person's at home, you can apply through the GP to get someone to come round, or you just go online and research, how do I get a CHC application? They live at home with living care. Right, normally they'll go to the GP and say you want a continuing healthcare assessment.
Okay. And I think the only question left on here that hasn't been asked is there any challenge to the local authority where their direct payment rate is around 25% less than the rate they pay contracted providers?
Again, down to the individual local authorities and their assessment of the rules. There doesn't seem to be any joined up thinking between a lot of the local. There's a statutory guidance, and the problem with statutory guidance, a lot of it is interpretation of individual local authorities.
Okay. All right, fantastic. So we've got no more questions in the chat forum. Has anyone else got any final questions for either Ian or myself or Gemma?
I've just seen that, Elaine. I was going to say to you, there are some really good fact sheets on the Age UK website. Just make sure they've been updated because some of them are a little bit out of date. And there's also a really helpful Scottish website as well for benefits in Scotland.
Right. All right. Well, I think that's probably a good place to finish. So firstly, thank you very much, Ian. It was extremely helpful and very informative. And Gemma, thank you very much for your presentation as well. Thank you, everybody, for joining us and taking the time to be with us and listen to us ramble on. We are available. I mean, you will all receive a copy of the presentation by email. If you have any additional questions that you haven't had the opportunity to ask or you think about, as I said, both Gemma and Ian's contact details are included in the presentation. You can reach the client services team at the Good Care Group 8 a.m. till 8 p.m. Monday to Sunday. Just find our number on the website and we'll be more than happy to help. Okay, so thank you very much, everybody, and stay safe and have a nice evening.
Thank you, Nathan.
Thank you.